Thanks, Allison. So the Sundog Connector project is the big one that I'd like to update everybody on. We had sort of taken a pause, at least from the perspective of our stakeholders and the general public, though behind the scenes, nobody has taken any pause. What that means is that we have just postponed the stakeholder meeting because we've got some additional information regarding the engineering of within the study area. And so there was conversations between the city of Prescott, Public Works Department and Planning Department, as well as the developer and CYMPO. So we needed to gain some extra information to make sure that we can engineer the best possible alternatives based on the best information we could find. So I just want to let you know that there's no actual pause on the project. We still anticipate being able to commence in September as planned, just that the stakeholder meeting has been postponed to make sure that the stakeholders get the very latest information. So I'll be announcing probably through a newsletter as well as an email and invitation about that information as soon as I have it. It's a little difficult to schedule a meeting for stakeholders that works for everybody. So that's always a tough thing. Another thing that's happening in my world, I'm the project manager of the SR69 Urbanized Master Corridor Plan. Now, this group helped me develop the scope in ensuring that our needs are met within this group and in that scope of work. Though it's certainly not as impactful as the Sundog Connector as far as this group is concerned. So as I have updates for the SR69 project, I'll keep you updated. Right now, we're just basically, we kicked it off, I think in December, and that's Kittleson and Associates. They've been working ever since. So we will be holding a lot of project meetings with the team from Sundog Connector, AECOM, and with Kittleson SR69 so that there's a lot of collaboration and no overlap in studies, and the needs are met and nobody's wondering who's who. Hi there. Next, I'd like to update the group on the SR89A DCR. So the Sundog Connector is a DCR. That's a design concept report. Design concept is as it implies, is conceptual design of the SR89A between SR89 and Glassford Hill Road. And that's to widen from 4 to 6 lanes. So I'm developing that scope now, or at least doing some research, preliminary research to develop the scope, and that involves a lot of outreach with our partners. At our next meeting, I will have prepared a better scope of work for you all to consider so that you can provide input for ecosystem mitigation. As Frank just mentioned, that those funds that Frank was talking about are rural transportation funds that we work with the group RTAC, who lobbies on our behalf with the state legislature to get us funding for our rural roads. As you know, a lot of the attention goes to MAG and PAG. So we're really excited that CYMPO is pursuing $23.1 million in rural funds from the state legislature. Really, really important for our area. When we filled out the project information for the 89 from 3 North to 5 North, if the scope allows for it, there would also be some multimodal perspectives to take into consideration. It's a little different because it's a state route, so that's not as common, but if we can get it, we will. So it'd be great to have better sidewalks, better access, truncated domes, all those good stuff for environmental justice as well. So that's all I wanted to update the group on, I think. Yeah, I think so. And then Bryn has a couple of updates for us.
Bryn and the familiar.
Bryn and Vinny. I always do the opposite. Then Brittany.
Good morning. There's one person in the room I don't know, Francisco. I'm Bryn Stotler. I'm a newish planner with CYMPO. I worked with CYMPO about 5 years ago. Went to work with the city for a number of years and came back in at the end of June of last year. Yeah, just wanted a couple of general updates on CYMPO activities. Tomorrow, Tuesday at 3 p.m. we present our annual CYMPO update to the Prescott City Council. We've been doing sort of a roadshow of sorts. We've presented to the county so far. We present it to the town of Prescott Valley, to their council. We come and just do a general reminder of who CYMPO is, what our purpose is, and how we function with the local jurisdictions as member agencies. Wednesday, we will also be presenting to the City of Prescott General Plan Committee. So we will be back in their council chambers at 2 p.m. On Wednesday of this week. And similar presentations, the general plan one will be a little bit more high level, broader focus as general plans are. So we've customized our presentations to the jurisdiction, so it's not the same content over and over again. So if you're interested in that, please come on into the City of Prescott, where you can't attend virtually anymore.
You can watch it online.
Oh, you can watch it, but you can't participate.
Yes.
Got it. We will also be doing similar presentations to the town of Dewey Humboldt and the town of Chino Valley. Allison, do you have dates for those?
Dewey Humboldt will be in February.
Yeah, that's later February.
Chino is the 24th at 6.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Chino is actually also tomorrow. Is that right? Yes, tomorrow at 6 p.m. So if you're in Chino Valley tomorrow evening, come by and check us out, or there's probably a virtual option for that one as well.
Prescott is when?
Prescott City Council is tomorrow at 3
At 3.
at the voting meeting. So that will be broadcast by the normal means. You can watch it on Facebook Live, I believe still. And then also on Prescott City website has that 12 miles out. There's a live feed on the Prescott City website. And then also I think the local TV channel, which I don't even remember what that is anymore.
I don't either.
So at any rate, those are general updates for CYMPO, and I think that's all I have.
We have a knock at the door.
Okay.
So
So,
in public, I have a question relating to the update. If I can be heard.
sure.
Thank you. My name is Rich Kaplan. I live in Ellis. I had a question. I was reading the EMAC mission statement, and it says that EMAC is to study and advocate for the preservation of interconnected ecosystems in the CYMPO region and integrate land use and mitigation for natural resource protection and wildlife habitats into the regional planning, etc. So my question is specific to Sundog, and Sundog, the DCR is supposed to have a focus on a no build option based on Mayor Phil Good's comments when the DCR was authorized. So my question for EMAC, I guess, is what is EMAC doing to fulfill its mission to look at the proposed Sundog connector in the context of its mission to see whether Sundog is a positive or negative for the region?
So basically, once they get further along and have the proposed corridors, then we'll review them and we'll be gathering other data, I believe, to see where the wildlife are going in that area, because we have game and fish on our committee. They have lots of data, and then we'll just see what alternatives we can recommend for whatever corridor is proposed.
Why, my question though is why is it not part of the DCR?
It will be.
It will be.
We're just not to
Before
that.
it's
We're just
completed.
not there yet.
Well, it's also, it's so with the DPR and environmental overview. So that piece is part of it. Jessica Ritz at AECOM is a project manager in charge of all things environment. Now, it's not as robust as an environmental review as a full engineering design project would be. So that would go into the full NEPA review, which Sandy would have a lot more, and Greg would have a lot more experience with. So at that point, that's when legal mitigations would come into play if there were the need for it. Is there anything else you want to, I mean, did this group also, I wasn't here when we developed the scope for this Sundog DCR. How much did this group, like I do now, get the input of the EMAC? Do you recall?
Yeah, we had input into the scope of work for the consultant to define what he had to do and open meetings and all that kind of stuff. Public hearings, public meetings, all that kind of stuff.
They kind of went through what their scope was for us.
Right, right.
So far that's
Okay.
seems like the extent.
One last thing, you mentioned the name of somebody who's in charge or responsible for, who's that?
Jessica Ritz, It's spelled like REITs, I believe, REITZ. It's pronounced Ritz. I will get you her contact information though. If that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Madam Chair, if I might ask, to open back up item number 4.
Sure.
I just wanted to make sure, Chuck, if there was anything that you wanted to, mention based on our conversation on Friday, just about updates and announcements. I know that there was something that you wanted to focus on. Maybe you decided you wanted to wait until the next agenda, but, if you wanted to
Well,
talk.
not the next agenda. I want to do it at this meeting.
Is it agendized? Or is it part of one of the items?
That's what, I thought you said it was part of one of the items.
So you
For
asked
the-
about the,
The freight corridor.
That's the 69 corridor.
the 69 corridor, yeah. And so that's part of the scope of the SR 69 urbanized master corridor plan is freight.
Oh, okay. Where
Um,
is that on the agenda? I
it's-
thought,
that was just one of my updates in item number 5. I just
Oh.
verbalized it.
oh, okay.
So, yeah, SR 69 is recognized as a national freight corridor, so part of the scope of that study will be to determine any freight needs. To help us meet that, I've invited members from the Arizona Truckers Association to join our stakeholder group for the
Mhm.
SR 69 master corridor plan. So I hope that they have a lot more perspective on the freight.
Well, I've been reading up on it and I took Jeff, what's his last name, Elizabeth? Gagnon, Jeff Gagnon from Game and Fish.
Yes, sir.
Because I noticed while I was doing something else for ADOT along 69, that there was a lot of potential natural habitat pass-through available. And so I wanted him to see it, to see if it really was that. And he thinks that a lot could be done in that area to promote the movement of wildlife and to protect it. So I have a map that I'm going to give to the group and then I started looking into funding and I found a rule, an act, the Great American Outdoors Act. And it's under the Land and Water Conservation portion of that act, where there's all kinds of money to actually buy, the Forest Service can actually buy land. So I contacted Francisco and we talked last Friday about that, if he knew about it, if it was something that was ongoing in the Forest Service here. And he said, no, didn't know about it, but it's a new law. So, you know, it's not.
Interesting.
Also the Forest Service management plan has a goal for wildlife corridors and stuff. So all this seems to fit together if we can get it to the consultant for that evaluation. I'd like to see that, but we're talking with the Forest Service and seeing if we can rustle up from some funds to actually buy connecting pieces from the Forest Service to the ADOT right of way for bridge construction and or other types of mitigation measures that can protect wildlife habitat and all that.
Well, that's exactly the partnerships we're looking for. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Yeah, yeah.
If you have the contact information for this Jeff Gagnon,
Oh.
Gagnon?
Elizabeth will.
I would
Yeah.
love to get that so that I can invite him to our SR 69 project.
Oh, okay.
That would be wonderful.
He's very familiar with our group.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, Elizabeth has it. He
fabulous.
works with her.
Okay,
He's
wonderful.
very familiar with it.
Awesome. Is he out in Kingman or here in Preston?
He's in,
He's so his office is located out of the Phoenix office, but he lives kind of up that way.
he lives in
So,
Kingsbury. Yeah.
and so essentially I can get you that information, Lindsay. That's no issue.
Awesome.
And then one more question. Chuck, what was the name of that act again that you were saying?
The Great American Outdoors Act
Okay,
has a section called the Land and Water Conservation
Yep.
something fund. That's it, fund.
Okay.
That talks about federal money that's available for the Forest Service for all kinds of stuff. The Great American Outdoors Act allocates $900 million annually, and it can't be rated for other projects that somebody from Illinois wants to do that doesn't have any business with Arizona. They can't rate it out of Congress. So
Love that.
there's $900 million available. You know, we have a map where we've kind of visualized where wildlife corridors can be. And I think it's something that could actually be done. Of course, nobody's done it, one of these acquisitions, so it's gonna be a big learning process.
We'd be in the case study around the country. That's
Well, actually, quite a few people have gone to this act for this very thing, for land purchases, and the other part is for maintenance of the national forests, you know, camping and trails and all that kind of stuff. So it's a great funding opportunity, I think, to play with and see what we can run up on.
So to that end, could I ask you and Francisco to perhaps just do a little bit of research, cursory research on maybe the interplay between those funds and highways, DOTs? Do you mind? Could I assign that to you too?
You can, it's really not a DOT
Right.
funded thing. What I'm looking at for the DOT is during the design and all that kind of concept, they know that the public wants the monies are available for wildlife crossings in these construction areas. The freight corridor, 69, if that goes through. I don't know how long it takes to get money. I have read on it. I mean, I could do a presentation at the next meeting, perhaps. I would, of course, have to get up with the Forest Service because the money's for them.
We could just tell them what to do with the money.
We'll just say, here's your laundry list, Francisco.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I told Chuck, probably one of the first steps is we need to meet with my leadership to even see what this would look like. One thing is this land that we are eyeing is outside of our designated boundary. I don't know how that plays in. So yeah, you know, coming up with with a game plan and then presenting it to leadership to see where it would go.
Yeah, that's great. Sometimes the federal government allows for a lot more than the state is able to take on. So we can't under prescribe at the state, but we don't have to over prescribe is basically how I would describe that. So sometimes there's just not policies in place at the state level to do that, but at least we'll know once we get there. I do want to acknowledge two hands, Allison, from Frank and then JD. I don't know if that JD's one is new. Frank, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I just have a quick comment about the sundog when it's appropriate. So I think if JD's is relevant to this part of the discussion, maybe take her and then come back to me.
Sure. I think JD will have to type in unless she's found a way to call in. So we'll allow JD to type her comment and then go ahead, Allison, if you don't mind reading that for me.
JD says it would be nice to see some of those funds could be used for state trust land. If
Yeah, so those are that's exactly the information that we would need to figure out. Absolutely. Great question, JD. Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Frank, on the Sundog connector? Madam Chair, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just real quick, I wanted to add in just to manage expectations from an engineering point of view. I heard the term focus on a no build. As engineers in the tech, we don't necessarily focus on any one scenario such as no build or different corridor alignments. The DCR will look at those and weigh the merits of each. And then the results will be presented as such, but we don't necessarily focus on one item to taint our engineering study. That'll come out as part of the study as to which one becomes the preferred alternate. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. From an engineering point of view, politics and Mayor Good and everybody may have their own point of view, but from the engineers and the TAC, we'll look at it as the merits weigh it.
Thanks. And it's important as planners to give all the information that we could possibly find. So to that end, we want this group to be able to comment on two build alternatives as well as the no build alternative and what the impacts are as far as the mission of this group is concerned. So we'll see a little bit more as time goes on.
If I could follow up to Mr. Frank Marbury's comments. So that raises an interesting question. I understand that he's saying there's not a specific no build option as part of the engineering, that consider a host of factors and the chips will fall where they may. But regarding the no build option, I've been asking since day one, what are the factors and the considerations that go into the no build option? And CYMPO has never actually answered me. And so I would renew my request or ask Mr. Marbury, what are the kinds of things that would go into where is the no build option even being assessed or considered as part of the engineering study?
Well,
Oh,
this isn't an engineering study, so it's just a feasibility study, right?
Yeah, we would call it a feasibility design
Yeah.
concept. And Frank, if you don't mind, I have gotten a little bit better idea of what the no build will look like. I'm struggling to answer the question of what triggers the no build besides the decision makers. So I'm gonna keep working on that with you. However, the no build will take into consideration what we know from the development agreements, what's allowed. So we know that Storm Ranch is going to build a road, and that's outside of our planning. That's going to happen regardless of if we plan with them or not. We also know that Yavapai Hills, as far as today's concerned, has a legal agreement for development with the city of Prescott. So the no build will show these sort of roads and what happens in between. Basically, we're gonna show sections of road as far as we can tell that's gonna be built with what we know to be the gaps between and how that would look. So that's what the engineering of a no build will look like. There's not a set trigger that just determines if that's the choice besides the decision makers, as far as I'm able to understand. So there's not a regulation that says, if there are this many signatures or, there's not a trigger that I can help determine. But that's the point of your question that I'm also still trying to understand. So that's the best I can answer.
Because I'm trying to understand it because everybody refuses to answer what are the criteria that would go into a no build option. And I would remind everybody that in the 2013 report that I guess it was ADOT that did it, but CYMPO participated. It was pretty clear that public opposition was pretty strongly against Sundog. And it's another one of these things that you say, well, we want to hear public comment, but then when you don't like the public comment, you look for ways to ignore it. And I don't want the no build option to fall into the same predicament that was one of the underlying things that were emphasized when the DCR was approved, before it was approved. And then it seems to be falling by the wayside. So I apologize for being a bit of a pest, but I think that it's an important issue and there should be some objective criteria that are delineated. So it's not a bit of a sandbagging effort, but when the report is released, we say, well, these are all the things that went into it. So we decide we should build it here. And you really haven't given serious consideration to the no build option. And that's why I suggested in the public, my initial comments, I don't hear EMAC doing much, if anything, about Sundog, and it would seem that EMAC is the vehicle protocol within CYMPO that if there's gonna be reasons to urge that Sundog should be maybe not built, EMAC would be to seem to be a committee that's front and center based on its mission statement, that it should be taking an active role. And it sounds like it's not doing anything and you're just kind of waiting for the DCR. So I would just, again, as a member of the public, urge that EMAC fulfill its responsibility and the DCR fulfill its responsibility. And that instead of this being some people are going to wave their hands, that somebody needs to sit down and say what the no build option really entails. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I, just a quick comment to add, the no build option, just as a body of work, also assesses the secondary consequence of not building. So it's a data analysis that also takes place to assess what the conditions will be on the alternate roadways, i.e. Highway 69. So we know what the actual conditions are on Highway 69 today. The no build, in addition to contemplating the non-built environment with SunDog, will also contemplate that data analysis, provide that information back to the community.
Right, but along those lines, we've had prior meetings involving some of the other committees, and this state Highway 69 corridor project is moving along in tandem. But for example, one of the issues that I think would come to mind on a no build option is to what extent would prioritizing the 69 improvements and widening 69 obviate the needs for Sundog, or make it clear that Sundog is going to be a waste of time and money unless those improvements are done first on 69.
Absolutely, agreed. One,
We're getting off topic. We're a little bit more off topic, so it's not on the list, so it's okay.
Thank you for indulging me.
Sure. So, item number 6, I think we're ready to move on now. To 6.
I think so.
Consideration and possible action to approve the December 6, 2022 meeting minutes of the EMAC. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And does anyone have any changes?
Yeah, I have one change. I think it's page 4 out of 6. I can find it.
There's only 4 pages.
Yeah, I know, here it is. Third paragraph, member Budinger noted he is exploring the potential of ADOT funds. I'd like to change that to federal funds. And ADOT funds too, but they will come later.
Yeah, a good point.
Yeah, yeah.
And Madam Chair, I did
Yes.
receive one suggested change from JD this morning to clarify that John Pratt is a private citizen member on the list of committee members.
Okay, thank you.
Good catch.
Are there any other changes?
No, ma'am.
Anyone mind to make a motion? Motion to approve, whatever,
Approve the minutes. I motion to approve the minutes.
okay, second? Anyone?
Should we say I approve the motion with the new changes?
Yeah, that would be good. to
Yes,
clarify.
with changes, yes.
With changes. I second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Any opposed? Nope, okay.
That was a sneeze, not a name.
Okay. Thank you. Review and discussion of environmental needs assessment plans.
So this draft was included in your agenda packet, and hopefully we've all had a chance to review it. If anybody hasn't, it is fairly brief, so I could allow for a quick 2-minute perusal. But I did want to open the floor to see if anybody had any comments at their first cursory investigation into this plan.
So can you explain what the plan is, just so we have the record?
Sure. So this is what we discussed at the end of last calendar year. As a group, we decided that we would benefit from the help of a consultant to help us decide how to move forward with this group and create a plan that would help us make sure that our work is being applied to the work within CYMPO. this is just a draft, so there's a lot of considerations for things like developing, membership policies and best practices. And so I think that's a pretty good introduction to this. For now, it's pretty straightforward, but I'd like to see if anybody has any thoughts about it.
Did everyone get a chance to review it?
Or should we give a couple minutes now?
The environmental needs and assessment and mitigation plan.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, this was for the scope of work for the consultant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead and take a couple minutes and gather your thoughts about
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
And we'll
since
come back
we're-
together.
Yeah, gonna be voting on that. I remember talking about it, but
Lindsay, you may have said this, but is the intent to bring this back at the next meeting for action?
Yes, it is. So the intent of this meeting today with this item is to recommend it to RTAC and then of course to the executive board. And bring it back at the next EMAC meeting. This also will help us to understand how to be a stronger unit as far as using our off time, how to develop public-private partnerships that are not as possible at CYMPO with being a government body. So this consultant would help us create those basically a SWOT evaluation, I would assume. And so this will take us almost to the end of our calendar year, but not to say that we wouldn't be doing anything in between. This is, there was a comment at our last meeting that somebody was worried that we're just gonna stop what we're doing to focus on the plan and get the consultant on board. But the life of a planner is navigating these things simultaneously. So of course, we would be carrying forth as professionals while developing this in anticipation for a consultant. So all things to make us stronger.
Does anyone have any comments on it?
no, I don't have any comments.
Anyone online have any comments?
If y'all could add department to the end of Arizona Game and Fish, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Is there any public comment?
Yeah. Hold a minute.
Oh, wait.
Anyone else on the committee have any comments? No? Okay, one from the public?
Sure. I looked at the agenda packet, but regarding this agreement, the fact that you're hiring a consultant, I would suggest that maybe there are members of the public that would be interested in seeing that the first project for this consultant be to look at the environmental impact of Sundog versus prioritizing the Highway 69 corridor. Since 69 is already a mess, and Sundog doesn't exist, that from an environmental standpoint, there might be reasons to favor focusing on 69 and delaying, deferring, or not building Sundog. And it would seem that environmental assessments are right up that alley, and that would be a perfect project for a new consultant that is there to spend money. That he should take, or she should take a look at that.
My one response I have to that is I would anticipate that one of the outcomes of this plan would be to get basically an implementation plan, a strategic planning way forward to prioritize what projects in the area need the most attention. I would assume that's what this group is looking for. So that consultant, yes, will absolutely help us prioritize. It's not that they'll also start doing the environmental work, though. They're gonna help us so that we know what the next steps are. Is that right? Everybody?
Well, I've heard Vinny say on some of the recent presentations, that CYMPO is an organization that doesn't like to just make plans that sit on the shelf. And since the number one and number two projects that CYMPO seems to have going are Sundog and 69, that I think the money being spent on a consultant would be better spent if it's looking at the realities of Sundog versus 69, and perhaps 69 ought to go first, since 69 is already an environmental catastrophe compared to Sundog, which hasn't gotten to that stage yet.
Madam Chair, we also have another.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, it seemed to me when I read through the list of things for this consultant to do, it reminded me of what this committee is to do. And I'm wondering, why are you looking at paying somebody to do what you all kind of bring together to people anyway?
Good question. It's because we know that this committee can be stronger. As I've taken over the CYMPO liaison role for this committee, the feedback that I'm getting is that there's a lot of spinning wheels and a lot of passion and a lot of drive to move forward. But the reality of regional planning is about the slowest thing in the history of all things. So how to balance those two realities is why we're bringing in some expertise. So what we're really hoping for is an expert in, managing committees and making a positive, proactive committee. We're not proactive, but I know that we have the strength and passion to keep being better. And we don't quite know what it is we need yet. So that's why we hire consultants. In our world, a lot of agencies typically are either planning in-house or we do a lot of consulting with partners because we don't have the resources to do it in-house. So that's why we bring in consultants. If there were 3 of me, this would be a far better one. So we're gonna hire 2 more of me in 1 person to help. So that's why. Thank you for asking that.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Quick tail on to that, we're also starting to receive new funding sources from the federal government that we need to optimize our chances at procuring that funding. And part of this analysis will help us have better project-oriented items to apply for. So it's not only sort of an overall confirmation of structure and purpose and a way forward mechanically, but it also helps us to be more in position for those funds that are available. One example of that would be carbon reduction funding that is brand new. We've never had that in this area before. And the EMAC can be instrumental in some of the conversations around how those funds are applied for and how they may be utilized in the future.
Thank you, Brent. That was perfect. And I do want to add to that, outside of this group, but still with this group in mind, we also have a consultant that this group has heard about before doing some project assessment work for us. We paid about $20,000 to a firm who bid on this, our request for proposals, who helped us to basically take all of our projects. We shoved it all at them and they put it through their cogs and then they're giving us this beautiful spreadsheet and all the information we need to go and apply for those funds. If I were to do that, I'd be spending, I'm salary and exempt, so I'd be losing a lot of my time because I'd spend all my weekends trying to research what I would need to apply for these funds. And so we do hire consultants for that. So to give you an example of how that can be successful, we also spent $20,000 to hire somebody to help us prepare applications for this highway safety improvement project. So $20,000 of CYMPO dollars netted $3.2 million for the region's projects. So that's why we bring in consultants. They can do a lot more with the time that they have. And that's private industry for them. That's my comment.
Thank you. Is there any other comments in regards to this scope of work? Are you looking for a recommendation?
Yeah, so we think it's ready to recommend up to the TAC, or is there something missing?
Yes, I think it's good to send it up to the TAC.
Would you like to make a recommendation?
I would like to make a recommendation to move the environmental needs assessment and mitigation plan up to the technical advisory committee for CYMPO.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Second, okay. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay, passes unanimously.
And she spelled I correctly. I couldn't have done
Okay, next, review and discussion of the draft scope of work for the active community for the active community transportation unified plan. Brent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. EMAC members and members of the public, this item was introduced to you a couple of meetings ago. It was sort of a foreshadowing that we are going to begin a planning process around active transportation. In the planning realm, that typically means bicycle and pedestrian, but because we're in a unique environment where we have a blend of rural and urban, we're also going to be looking at things like equestrian means, trailheads, and other ways that active transportation intersects with our built environment and transit connections, which are under development in the area currently. So you have the complete scope in your packets. It's quite a big document. It was a lot to absorb, and I wouldn't have been surprised if you didn't read it all, but I just want to go through some of it and make some highlights so that you understand what our planning process is going to be about. And it's going to be kicking off timeline wise. We will have the TAC and executive board, well, we'll have the TAC review the scope in February. We will go through the RFP process in March and April, and hopefully name a consultant and have approvals to proceed by around May. So Allison has now put the shared screen and put the scope up there. One of the first things that we did was brand it, because we're going to be using this nomenclature, this active transportation language at community events that are geared towards active transportation, such as the Whiskey Off-Road, such as the Prescott Valley Bicycle Rodeo, things that people who are interested in this type of transportation would be inclined to be at. And we're going to engage with other volunteers from special interest groups that are involved in bicycle and other forms of active transportation to help us volunteer and do outreach at those events. So we're excited about that. But let's get back to the branding. So I'm kind of excited about it. ACT UP, Active Community Transportation Unified Plan. This is a vision for enhanced active transportation in the region. What's unique about this plan is that it will definitely have a general, regional, high-level view of what active transportation is currently and what it can mean in our jurisdictions and region in the future. But there are going to be sub-scoped plans for each jurisdiction, because each jurisdiction in our member agencies, Prescott, PV, Chino Valley, Dewey, Humboldt, and the county have different inclinations when it comes to providing services and facilities for bikes, bicyclists, and pedestrians. What does that look like in the built environment? Crosswalks, protected crosswalks, mid-block crossings, bike lanes for bicyclists, correct bicycle signage so that drivers, motorists are aware of vulnerable road users. And that's one of the most important focuses of this type of a plan. So just to highlight some of the sections of the scope, we have a very well identified project purpose, which is to look at our region and then look at each individual jurisdiction, inventory facilities that exist currently, look for gaps in those facilities that could effectively support bicycle and pedestrian users. And in particular, we look at school environments and campuses and access to school campuses so that we make sure that families and children who have pedestrian access or bicycle access to their school campus can get there in the safest way possible. Allison, I'm just going to be kind of jumping around, so I probably won't make sense with where we are scrolling on the screen, but one of the things that we're going to sort of subcategorize and do a view of is technology. So many devices have now come onto the market that are electric that can be utilized for active transportation. I'm a new e-bike user and I live in downtown Prescott. One of the first things I figured out is downtown Prescott is not a really great place to ride a bike, even if it's motorized. So I feel vulnerable on many of the streets of Prescott, especially in the downtown environment, which is a lot more hilly and the rights of way are narrower. So that's a thing that we're going to sort of sector out and not get too wrapped up in throughout the plan. We're going to have a separate white paper on technology and how those devices will be interacting with the active transportation users and the facilities in the area. Already looked at the schedule a bit. We will be bringing a consultant on board, of course. Project management team will be typical. I will be the CYMPO project manager. We'll have a consultant project manager. And we'll have a lot more information about the public outreach as we get more into consultant selection. But the scope of work, really just to recap, we obviously need them to have their marching orders with project management, public and stakeholder involvement. We go through all of the typical steps when we do a large planning process. In the scheme of things, this is a pretty big plan. We have $200,000 allocated for this plan. That's approaching what we spend on the regional transportation plan. So this will be a very comprehensive look. And we're so excited because it's kind of a fun part of our transportation network. Public involvement is going to be done in phases. Phase 1, get the word out. Phase 2, needs and opportunities. Phase 3, report back and identify proposed improvements. Phase 4, take the draft plan around and introduce it to the jurisdictions and hopefully gain acceptance. And then Phase 5, identifying project opportunities and teeing them up for these funding opportunities that we know directly support these types of projects. I mentioned the inventory already. That's something that has to happen. We have to look at everything that does exist, already built. Prescott Valley in particular is in a big effort right now to install pedestrian crosswalks and sidewalks because they were largely built as a rural community that didn't have any of that type of infrastructure. So new development has come in and has started to apply, the current codes are being applied, so they do have pedestrian crosswalks and sidewalks, but original Prescott Valley doesn't have that much at all. And that's a big retrofit undertaking. So we will be looking at things like that when we do an inventory of facilities. We establish a vision and goal. Part of that will be done with our public participation process. We have a safety plan, regional safety plan that is being updated as we speak, and all of that safety data will be poured into this plan so that we can focus on areas where there are specific crash data that need to and crash inclinations that need to be mitigated. It's a big part of the backdrop of this plan is safety. Completing the network is a goal, so we're going to be looking for significant regional routes, and then we're going to be looking for secondary routes that connect to those significant regional routes. Equity analysis, that's something that is going to be a part of every plan that we do. And it hasn't been a real focus historically speaking, but we're in a new age and equity analysis is actually a requirement of using federal dollars for these plans. Identifying gaps and opportunities, again, we're looking to complete the network. And then having projects identified, prioritized per jurisdiction, so that each jurisdiction comes away with a short list of things that are easily implementable and with cost preliminarily identified, so that each jurisdiction can take that, that data and the prioritized projects and start looking for implementation opportunities within their own jurisdiction. At the end of the planning process, of course, we will be taking this to each of the jurisdictions that are highlighted in the plan and asking their council or board to accept the plan. And at the end of that, we will have something that is really actionable and which time has really come. So excited about this planning process. If anybody has any questions or comments, I'm happy to take them. And we are still in the process of identifying a full stakeholder list. So if anybody has friends, acquaintances, or you yourself are involved in this type of transportation and would like to be a part of this process, please reach out to me at CYMPO and I will get you on my list and you'll receive all communications about the plan.
Is there any questions from any of the committee members?
I have a comment, please.
Go ahead.
This is Lindsay. I just have a comment on that. I've been talking a lot recently about environmental justice and resiliency. And there was a response, it's sort of a cheeky response from the public about a comment I made about resiliency. And while of course I understand that perhaps there's the Sundog Disconnect group, for example, sort of scoffs at community health involving a new corridor. And I totally understand that construction doesn't necessarily mean healthy air. But what I do mean by that is, our community is designated as a transportation disadvantaged area by the US Census, which means that we don't have alternative routes if there were an environmental disaster or an accident. There are not alternatives for folks who lose their ability to drive. There's no transit, limited transit, limited connectivity between trails if folks are relegated to using these systems. I also sent forward an email a few months ago of accessible trail usage. And while combustion, gasoline powered things might not fit in our idea of a trail system, environmental justice and resiliency to those who cannot access the great outdoors, I think trumps a lot of things like that. And that is what I mean by resiliency. A community who has a lot of different means to access vital services, school, work, places of worship is really important to the health of a community. So I don't try to be cavalier when I use the term resilient and environmentally just. I do understand that that might not fly, that kind of flies in the face of developing a 3.5-mile corridor made out of asphalt and combustion. These are all parts of what environmental justice means and resiliency. And so that's where that comes into play here.
And that was kind of the focus of this committee, to always to remind them that we're not just looking at wildlife corridors, we're also looking at people corridors and get people movement. That's part of the ecosystem connectivity. We're part of that ecosystem. Is there anyone else from the committee? I see that. Is there anyone else from the committee that has any comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Yes. go
I
ahead.
hadn't really expected to comment on this, but I guess it's more of a question with the term resiliency. And is the question about health impact and health effects something that you would consider to be part of resiliency? I was doing a little looking online, and I see that the Federal Highway Administration has a group focused on health, and I forgot what it's called, but it's something like health and transportation or something. And a big point of that program that they've established, I think, targets resiliency, but maybe in a different way than you were alluding to, because they make a point of saying that society has learned that putting highways in certain location creates a lot of noise pollution and health effects. And there's a whole load of papers that have been written about the negative consequences of having highways next to residential areas. And I think that's equally true, whether it's in a city or an urban corridor, or putting Sundog next to a residential community. And so resiliency is not a term I scoff at, but I would encourage that it should be given the full-blown treatment, which I think would include the health effects. And apparently the Federal Highway Administration now sees that as an important priority. So I thought I would mention that.
It's very true. Was it the 303 or the 202 or 101? When it was being repaved or something, the noise complaints were through the roof. The pavement that they used with the tires rollers on it was that high pitched squeal that everybody around was losing sleep over. Literally, I'm an insomniac myself, so I can't even imagine. So those are absolutely become very clear that the Federal Highway Administration can't ignore.
And I guess just as a follow-up, do you have any idea whether those considerations are playing any part of the PCR on Sundog?
Well, in so much as gathering purpose and need. So when we were in that phase, hearing a lot from residents of Yellowknife Hills about noise worries, light pollution, as well as the scarring, as Joanne Ohlers has put it. So it is part of the consideration. Now, I'm not sure if technically that's part of the environmental concerns or if it's part of our project management concerns, but that was taken into consideration, absolutely.
It's not just noise, though. These studies show that there's the deleterious health impact on people living near these highways, including for pregnant women and all the exhaust and everything else, pollution that gets generated. think that's an important consideration. Since, again, the Highway 69 is already suffering from those problems, the resources would be better spent on fixing that rather than to create a second brand new problem with Sundown.
Okay, so back to this scope of work. Is there any other comments from the committee? Does everyone agree that this is ready to move forward to the TAC? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, we actually didn't need an action.
Oh,
It was
okay.
more of a discussion item and just to provide additional information. Madam Chair, just Lindsay's sidebar on resiliency just made me think that when I mentioned equity analysis, I didn't really explain what that was and sort of contextually relates. Equity analysis is going to look at, and I'll use Prescott Valley as the example since I already referenced the lack of sidewalks in many places, and pedestrian crosswalks, new development, which is typically the higher priced areas of town, enjoy those facilities because the code was updated and required it. Older areas of town where things might be socioeconomically slightly different don't typically enjoy those types of facilities in a town that came up from a rural status like that. So the equity analysis really looks at how folks throughout our communities can access these facilities so that everybody has a shot to get to where they're going safely. That's basically what it amounts to. And I think it's worth noting.
Yeah, Brett and I work with the VA's mobility manager who helps bring folks in. And I didn't realize how many people walked from downtown Phoenix to the VA campus.
Yes,
That's terrifying.
it is.
Downtown Phoenix or
My gosh.
That's where I was. Everybody else catch that too. Yeah.
I didn't care how.
Then why are we walking?
It's hot.
Phoenix?
Yeah, that's no problem.
But the thought of that terrifies me. The solution clearly isn't get them to drive a car.
Right.
They need to get there and they're clearly on foot. So.
With that, I think we're complete.
And there was another study done back in Prescott National Forest was the pilot project for sustainable recreational planning. And part of that was trying to look back into the communities of needs like that, of access and trails and things like that. It was hard to get the public to look back into the community because that was probably back in 2010 when that study was done. And most of the focus when they look at the trails and stuff has been out in the forest. But there's still that need to look back into your communities with there at the time we were looking at a lot of VA that are coming back with disabilities and not being able to participate or to recreate outside. So there's been a change in society that we need to update some of that to ADA accessible.
And boy, didn't COVID reveal that
Yeah.
to all of us because those were our options.
Yeah.
During that 2 to 3 year period. So. All right.
Deb, somebody had something to say up there, it looks like. She's like.
Oh,
Your boss.
Yes,
I'd like
Deb.
to, I just want to thank Brennan Lindsley for all your thorough work and exploring all the different avenues of all the new rules and legislation. And it's kind of, it is exciting to think of what we can do when all of this starts to coalesce as far as being a stronger committee.
Absolutely.
Exciting. Thank you.
Your dog was excited too. We were.
Thank you, Deb.
Is there anything else you're looking at from the committee?
So
I don't think so.
I have 2 maps I'd like to have let the committee have as part of today's meeting. How do I do that? We can just copy them at the end?
They'll scan them and email. to us.
Yeah, I can do that. I can
Scan
scan
it
an
and
email,
email.
absolutely.
Yes, okay.
Mhm.
So one is kind of my look at wildlife movements for the freight corridor. And then the other one is a central Yavapai area corridor map for wildlife.
Perfect. And this map, Chuck had actually sent me last month. This is one that we had talked about very briefly that the consultant, it's just a highlighted map with conceptual wildlife corridors for those of you online, and I'll send that out to you. But this is something that the consultant will help to develop a GIS interactive map for us that we can, you know, basically put into policy if that's how we decide to move forward. So I'll go ahead and either scan this in or send the electronic copy that you had already provided me, Chuck, and I'll send that out to the group for you.
Okay,
And then we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting.
okay, yeah.
Manager, we do have an address.
Will that be available to,
It'll be part of the next packet for the next meeting.
And you guys do you want me to do a presentation next meeting
I think that would
about
be perfect.
the,
Yeah.
Great Outdoors Act and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then Francisco, if you find out that, you know, perhaps you are or are not, your office is or is not able to, you know, that's the kind of research I'm hoping for, so.
And then
Yeah.
we have a map so that you can explain what the maps are and stuff.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
So they're in text.
That'd be great. I'll make sure to have that on the agenda.
okay,
Just so that everybody is aware, with open meeting laws, we have to, correct me if I'm wrong, Allison, 24 hours is the limit, and I would assume that's business hours. So, if there's something on the agenda that you'd like, make sure you reach out to me as soon as you get it so that we can make that adjustment.
Anyone else have anything good of the order today?
No, ma'am.
I think we adjourn at 11:08. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks,
Mhm.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks for listening in, JD.